Hello, everyone. Welcome to our She Emerged podcast. And today with me is Dr. Katheryne. And so I am so delighted to have Dr. Katheryne here with me today. I have known Dr. Katheryne for quite some time. We have both been, cohorts in our dissertation program. And so today it is my honor and privilege to have her join me on this podcast. And I am going to allow Dr. Katheryne to just introduce herself and share with our audience a little bit about, who she is and her bio. Go ahead, take it away.
Hi, Sophia. This is like amazing. I love how you're doing this podcast, and you told me that you've been doing it for years. So this is really great to get into the community too. A little bit about myself is I do have a private practice right now. It's Luminescent Mind, and I see clients, children, adolescents, teenagers, young adults, all the way to 60. And I've been in this field since like around 2015. 2014. So it's been quite a while working with many different populations in the community. So I'm very excited to share more about that.
That is great. And so today we are sharing actually on trauma. So this episode is centered around trauma talk. And because I know you are a licensed mental health counselor and as well a licensed marriage and family therapist, so you are well versed in both both areas. And again, I am so honored to have you here. So tell us a little bit, what is trauma and how does that, trauma affect us?
Okay. So trauma can definitely deeply affect our experiences with family members or even our friends at work. Traumas can be an isolated event. So some situations that happen, whether it's like physical abuse, sexual, financial, emotional, it can be bullying for kids that continue year after year, which turns into complex trauma because it's not just one isolated event anymore. It's multiple. It changes our perspective of like our safety, our trust, our self-worth. It kind of alters our identity because we start second guessing who we are as a person, which then prevents us from even having healthy or solid relationships in the future.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that is a lot to unpack, right?
Yeah.
And so what population, you mentioned having working with different clients. What population do you normally serve though?
So I've worked between 4 to 5 years old, as young as that, all the way to even around 60 years old. And depending on what client I have, that changes their therapy session, because you might be doing play therapy, with a 4 or 5-year-old, and then you might be doing more in-depth childhood trauma work with someone who's 60.
Oh, wow. So are there cycles that are recurrent when it comes to trauma?
Yes. So trauma can manifest in many different layers of our life. So it can be, again, like within our family system. So if our parents went through something with their parents, and then they're kind of continuing that cycle, and now they're doing the same thing to their children, and it just keeps going, then that would be generational trauma. And if we can't identify what those patterns are, they just keep going within the family system.
Mhm. I like the fact that you mentioned generational trauma. So how would your clients know, if that's a part of their family of origin stuff when it comes to trauma?
When it comes to trauma, something that might be easy for them to recognize is maybe they grew up and they didn't like something specifically, but didn't know why they didn't like it. They
Mm,
might have felt uncomfortable, or let's say they would have asked questions and they would get dismissed because maybe their parent didn't know. And it's
mhm,
okay for our parents not to know everything, but then they hold on to that being dismissed. And
mhm,
then they have kids and they might be doing the same thing because they don't know the answers to everything either.
mhm.
So that just being dismissed can keep going
Yeah.
within
So the
generation.
cycle continues is what I'm hearing.
Yes,
Perfect. Wow. So based on the population you work with, walk us through relational trauma and resilience.
of course. So For relational trauma, we might focus on like their relationship with their parents, so mom and dad. We might focus on how those relationships, if there's anything in common with the person that they're currently with, maybe dating or in a relationship with,
Mhm.
or if they have kids, do they notice anything that's the same from when they were growing up to what their child is going through? So we kind of look at that pattern. With a lot of my clients, we might do genograms to help them identify what those patterns are, because it can be kind of hard to be like, oh, everything was great. And a lot of our clients will say, everything was great. I had a great relationship. But as therapy continues, they might disclose, well, I wasn't really able to talk to mom and dad about this. Like, I couldn't really be emotional. We didn't have that type of relationship. So then we looked at, well, was there any relationship that you had that was on an emotional level that you could be vulnerable with without being dismissed?
So the fact that you mentioned genogram, that's also, a way that you'll be able to see the structure, of the family and the functionality of the family.
Yep. So that we can see if there's fused relationships and that builds
Mhm.
codependency. We can see if there was a lot of abuse that happened, maybe physical abuse or emotional or psychological, how that abuse they accept from their friends, like at school or teachers, because they think it's okay.
Mhm.
And then they grow up noticing that it's not okay because of the situations that they're currently in.
Wow. So then they continue to normalize it before they get to realize, wow, this is not the norm. So sitting with you would be, an essential part of their healing process, it sounds like.
Correct. And a lot of therapy is not necessarily jumping straight into the trauma. Like we want to be able to get to understand our clients a little bit better. And then slowly, gradually, we talk about that trauma so that they don't feel like they're being re traumatized or overwhelmed leaving session to the point that they don't know how to cope or don't have a support system outside of therapy.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So I love the fact that, yes, there are so many nuances surrounding trauma, but I like the idea that you said, you don't initially jump into that piece of their story. So, how would you ease them into that space? Because I'm thinking a lot of clients may be, um, not ready for that other, like you said, it's like reliving their trauma, so to speak.
Mhm. Yes. So in the beginning, what I do with my clients is I do start with like a genogram because I
Mm.
can get history of medical. I can get history of like their education, how, what's their highest education or what did they like in elementary, middle school, high school, college? Who are they close to in their family? So we talk a lot about just them. And
Ah.
then after we finish the genogram, we kind of go back and review if they've noticed anything. Did they gain any insight? Did they
Mm.
notice anything that still continues in their present day or in their future relationships and how it could be affecting that? Because trauma can impact our trust with individuals. It can impact our safety, our view about the world to the point that we might not want to interact with it.
I like that. That you don't jump right in, but what I'm also hearing is that you're building that therapeutic alliance as well, because
Yes,
that's, important, as you mentioned, for them to be able to trust you as a therapist. That
correct.
is so important. Wow. So, how have you impacted women in terms of, because I notice you also coach as well, outside of being a therapist. So, share with us about that.
So coaching is definitely a little bit different from therapy. We don't really go too into detail about the trauma that's happened in the past. If I do identify that's popping up, then I
Yeah.
do recommend therapy because they have to, go straight into that to see what's going
Mhm.
on. For coaching, we focus mainly on like what are their goals right now and where do they
Mhm.
want to see themselves in the future.
Mm.
So let's say, someone who wants coaching, they come in and they say, I want to be able to share my opinions, speak my voice, stand up for myself. Then we're focusing on boundaries and what that looks like and
Yeah.
very solution focused kind of mindset.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you also work from that lens. Can you share about what solution focus is about?
Of course. So solution focused is we get the client's goals or our coaching clients and we focus on like where they are right now from like a scale from 1 to 10 if they're happy in the life that they're living. And if
Mhm.
they're saying 1, I'm not happy at all, well what would it look like to get to 2? What would it look like to get to 3? So we take those smaller goals to build to the bigger goal of 10. what life would they actually want to be living.
And so, for a client who is probably, wondering, or any person for that matter, wondering how they can, actually sign on, they've watched you, listened to you, heard about your practice. How would they be able to, come on board with you in terms of that coaching aspect of it?
So to be a client, like I do have social media platforms. So I do have Instagram that they can follow me on, which is the Luminescent Mind. I do have like the professional page, which is Dr. Katheryne Puentes, that they can follow me on, and they can message me directly. I also have my website, so the luminescentmindllc.com, that they can go on to book a consultation. I definitely offer the 15-minute consultation because I want to make sure that, who I am and who they are, like they feel comfortable. So we have a discussion about what they really want to work on before even moving forward, because I wouldn't want to schedule an appointment and they're not feeling comfortable. So I
Yeah.
definitely try to offer that.
Okay. Nice. I love it. So I noticed that we have, individuals in the audience. Are there any questions that you may have for Dr. Katheryne at this time? You could go ahead and type that in the chat, and, I'd be happy to share that with our broader audience, because, you know, that could also help others who may have been wondering about how to get on board, in terms of working through their trauma, because very often we know, based on our training, that healing is not linear, right? And so it's a process, it takes time. So just in case anyone is wondering, what does that look like? I wanted to also see if you could highlight what are some of the different traumas, just in case people are wondering, well, I've gone through this and it may be that, sometimes it's very sketchy.
Yeah. Well, to make it like to stay away from the DSM, because there are many different diagnoses. So there's like,
Absolutely.
yeah, there's a lot. But the main thing that I focus on with my clients is there's something that's bothered you to the point that you can't unthink it. Like not
Yeah.
unthink it, but it's bothering you like every single day. You wake up and you're thinking about that. You're going to sleep and you're thinking about that. You're
Mhm.
talking to people within family and friends, and you're like, I don't think I should tell them this because, this is what happened last time. So
Yeah.
if that isolated event or even multiple events has impacted you to the point that you don't want to communicate with others, you're thinking about it on daily or weekly, like there's not one moment that it's not on your mind. So it's very hard to pinpoint, like you have to go through war to do it. You don't have to go through war. You don't have to be a police officer or fighter. You can be in a very abusive relationship and not even know it.
Mhm.
And statistically, you can stay in an abusive relationship for 2 years and not leave.
Mm. Share more about that, because there's also that relational aspect of it, right? Relational trauma. And how would they know when that relationship, as you just mentioned so profoundly, they would not know, they would not be aware of it. So what are some of, the things that they should be looking for in that relationship?
Yeah. I think the biggest one is dismissing like who you are as a person.
Mm-hmm.
So if you notice that they're very nice to you in certain moments,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't like that you did something, and it could be like cook something different, or you got
Yeah.
flowers, or you didn't clean something right, like, and they're nitpicking you, and they're making you feel horrible, and you can apologize, but they keep bringing it up maybe on a daily, on a weekly, a monthly, or they bring up things that have happened years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And there's definitely a difference between, something pops up and it reminds you, wow, I can't trust this person because this happened before. That's
Yeah.
something to discuss with your partner and possibly go to couples therapy. But if
Mm-hmm.
you find out that you've discussed it with your partner, you've talked about it, and they bring it up to put you down as a person, then that's entirely
Mm-hmm.
different.
Yeah. And so I'm also thinking of the cost that is attached to it, because sometimes you say therapy and immediately people think about the expense.
Yes. Yes. So it can be, expensive. For my private practice, we do accept Florida Blue, United, Optum. So we do work with insurances to be able to provide them these services, or even
Mhm,
doing a super bill if we're out of network. So the possibility of insurance reimbursing them. And we also offer a sliding scale based off their income. So we're wanting to work with them, not have a financial burden to the point that they can't figure out what's going on in their life.
mhm. I like the fact that you do offer sliding scale, right?
Yes.
And there are often times that people wonder, can they also access services if they're not able to, afford private practice? Are there other, spaces that they can access these services?
Yes, there definitely are other companies and lines that they can take. So I know a lot of college and universities offer free therapy. You're not working, you don't have an income, like they'll be able to see you, and it'll be a learning experience for other doctoral students,
Mm-hmm,
and it'll be guided by a professor as well. So like that's one avenue that they can take, or contacting 411 to gain information in their area. It's like a information number. So you can say, I need therapy, I'm not working, or I need something that's a sliding scale between this range, and they'll provide resources for you.
mm-hmm. Absolutely. I like that. So I noticed you had QS as part of your, experience. Can you share with us what that is about?
Yes, so I am a qualified supervisor. So I see interns who are a registered intern within the state of Florida to gain their license. So they will have to collect about 1,500 within 2 years and pass their exam to be a licensed clinician. And I help them with supervision. So we talk about their caseload, we talk about what's going on, if they're feeling stuck, or they have a client that they don't know what direction to go down. So it's very supportive for them to be able to grow their therapeutic techniques, but also help them in a way that they can help their client.
So is there a fee attached to you being their supervisor?
Yes. So they get charged weekly, every week or every biweekly, depending on how many clients they have for within the 2 years. But even then, if they're a student, I offer a certain fee. And if they're in private practice, I offer a different fee, because I want to be able to help the students, because I know that they have to financially afford college, and that
Mhm,
wouldn't be fair for me to see that they're financially struggling when they're trying to get their hours.
mhm. And do you only see, marriage and family therapists?
I see marriage and family and mental health counselors for qualified supervision.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, having said that, and all of your accolades, can you share with us how did you, go through your PhD program and now you have a private practice? What would you say to other up and coming or, therapists in training, so to speak?
Yes, I would say definitely take your time. Don't rush. Like it is a long process. I think I started the PhD program in like 2017, and I graduated the end of 2021, 20, and then beginning of 2022. The coursework is very in depth. It gets you to understand, like, for example, the relational components of a family system for marriage and family. And then that dissertation project is a lot. It can be very overwhelming. It's like talked about, it's a full-time job. So definitely taking your time with that, and having that support system is the best when you're going through a program that can be very rigorous on your mental health, your physical health, and yeah,
Yeah. So, a lot of self care.
a lot of self-care. Yes.
Hmm. And so, in terms of your dissertation, were you able to incorporate trauma? What was that surrounding your dissertation topic?
So my dissertation mainly focused on my family system, because in order for me to help my future clients, I have to understand myself and my own identity.
Mhm,
And that can be very hard when we're in a therapy session with a client. And if we don't know who we are as an individual, there can be a lot of transference that might not be beneficial for the therapy session or our client or for ourselves.
mhm,
So my dissertation mainly focused on my family system, what I noticed, patterns that continued. I focused mainly on Bowen, which is generational patterns that we need to acknowledge, and then how that can help me with my clients in the future.
mhm. So overall, it sounds like you are well rounded. You were able to utilize, that approach and also incorporate that into your private practice, kudos to you.
Yeah.
That's great. And
Thank you.
so can you help us to understand how you may have emerged through some of your experiences or your journey? Would you be able to, share that?
Yes. A lot of it was like my background in martial arts. So I am a fourth degree black belt. So
Oh,
taekwondo,
nice.
yeah. Yeah. So taekwondo definitely has helped me and guided me to where I am today.
Mhm,
The tenets of taekwondo, focusing on that individual we are, how to strengthen that, how to have your own self and move forward in that, and being able to respect everyone around you, but still be able to stand, with who you are and where you came from, how you grew up. Like a lot about trauma is we feel like because of how we grew up, it prevents us from having a good future. And it doesn't have to be like that. The generational trauma doesn't have to continue. It can stop at a certain point. We just have to put a lot of effort in wanting to be able to build a better self.
mhm. I absolutely love that. And I can see how well your training, even through your dissertation program, it has helped you tremendously that now you're able to, utilize all the lens, and incorporate that into your private practice. And not only that, you are a supervisor. So you can give back to up and coming therapist. And so I like the fact that you are able to incorporate your own family system, and perhaps someone is wondering, well, what is the family system about? How can you, be able to conceptualize generational trauma, different cycles and different things, and to be able to incorporate that into, the space where you're able to grow.
Mm-hmm.
So that is that's interesting.
Yes, because as kids, we're sponges. We take everything in,
Yeah.
and you live with your family maybe in their house for 18 years, let's say, before you go to college. So that's 18 years of
Mhm,
living with the same patterns that might be occurring, or being with our same classmates from elementary, middle to high school,
mhm,
getting, certain teachers. Maybe within elementary school might be the same teacher every year, and then we change it up in middle school, and there's a lot of change. There's a lot of
mhm,
seeing what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And if we're getting a certain, I guess, emotion or behavior from somebody in all grade levels, like we do at home, it's going to affect us on a certain level that we think, oh, after 18, I can continue it and it'll be okay.
mhm. Yeah. And I also hear you mentioning the whole growth, you know, human growth and development process and what that may look like. So, how would one, kind of identify what healthy looks like as opposed to unhealthy?
That's a really good question. Many of my clients, I even talked about like films. They watch a film
Mm,
and they see a romance and they're like,
mhm,
this is how a romance should be. And
mhm,
a lot of movies hype it up and make it even more than what it is. So then
mhm,
we think, oh, this is how it's supposed to be. A relationship is supposed to be, and it's not how it's supposed to be. Or we look at our parents' relationship and it might not be like that either. So when we actually get a relationship that we feel secure in the sense of we can talk about things and not get upset about it. Like we
mhm,
can share our opinions and our thoughts and we're feeling validated, then
mhm,
that's a perfect opportunity to say, this is something that I've been thinking about and I don't necessarily like. And we see how the other person reacts. We
mhm,
see, well, this is how it's supposed to be regardless. So that's a very strict boundary. There's no compromise, no flexibility, no nothing,
mhm,
and we're trying to compromise. So
mhm,
that might be a red flag all in itself because the person we're trying to be transparent with or vulnerable with is putting a hand up saying no.
mhm. So that also sounds like control,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Wow. I know Nedra, she talked about the different kind of boundaries. So, and I know you also, based on your social media, I noticed that you do a lot of boundaries, right? So,
Yeah.
how would you incorporate that into that relational space that you're just talking about?
Yeah. I think the best way to set boundaries is acknowledging what exactly your boundaries are first, which
Wow.
is your identity. What are
Mhm,
you okay with? What are you not okay with? Because if we're going straight to the person we're talking with, like a friend or a family member or a partner, we automatically take their boundaries. They're right. That's how it's supposed to be. But we're still feeling a certain type of way. We don't feel like that's how it's supposed to be. So I
Yeah.
would say kind of like starting with you yourself, making a list of things that you like, that you don't like. And when you have these conversations, you can kind of gain perspective. You can see what their boundaries are, what their perspective are, so that you're
Mhm.
able to talk about yours. And is there a way to meet in the middle? Is,
Wow, I love that.
yeah.
Well, doesn't it like appear to you that we're also looking at, that other person is also aware of what your values are,
Yes.
right?
Yes. So it does depend. Like there are some clients that we might not talk about our values personally as a
Okay.
therapist, because
Yeah.
then that would influence them. So if they're very codependent and they like to fuse relationships, then
Mm-hmm.
it might not be beneficial to share those values with them, because then they take in like this is how it's supposed to be, but that
Mm.
doesn't mix well with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I could see how that could skew things in the relationship. And
Yeah.
then, like you mentioned in the beginning, it would be hard for one person to, you know, kind of get out from that relationship. So if someone is listening, what would, you know, I'm not saying what would you tell them to do, but what would be some of the strategies that you work with your clients? How do you know when a relationship is toxic and you're working with this client? How do you know when the client is actually benefiting from the sessions, or how would they notice, wow, this is an unhealthy relationship, because they're seeing all the patterns.
Right, right. So I do come from like a CBT background as well.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
we look at the thoughts. What are you thinking about the situation? What are you feeling? What's your action? And a lot of my clients will say, I immediately feel this way. They don't
Mhm.
have a thought, they don't have a feeling, they just have like a body sensation. So
Okay.
whether they feel butterflies in their stomach, we talk
Yeah.
about what those butterflies mean. And
Mhm.
is it nervous, or is it you really like them, or is it trying to tell you that you're uncomfortable? So
Mm.
many individuals, if they've been through a traumatic event or they're just stressed out, they disconnect themselves of understanding their body. They're understanding what's really physically happening to them,
Yeah.
which could be hard to set boundaries if you don't know what's happening to your body.
Wow, that's great, Catherine.
Yeah.
Dr. Catherine. I'm so used to calling you Catherine. So, you know, Christine, also I shared this with her, and I see Christian in this space. How do you deal? This is a question for you. How do you deal with breaking the cycle of these generational traumas when the people you get from them refuse to acknowledge the bad behaviors and always say things like, "You turned out fine"?
Right.
Great question.
That is a great question, because I can think of a lot of parents who say that, like, if we didn't hit you, we didn't say this to you, you wouldn't be where you are today.
Hmm.
Um, but where we are today might be because of all the effort we did to outdo those generational traumas and to
Yeah.
be different. And it might just be, well, look at where our relationships today. Is this the type of relationship you want with me? Which might help break the generational trauma for our parents to realize, oh, it's not. We barely talk. It's like once
Yeah.
a week, or if it's off
Yeah.
and on. And when it's off, you notice, oh, my anxiety is so much better because I'm not talking to this person. So that's
Mhm.
that emotional and physical disconnect. And when we are talking to them, we feel overwhelmed when we talk to them. So
Mhm.
there are a lot of parents that maybe reach 60, 70, 80 years old that they're
Mhm.
very unlikely to want to make any changes in their life, which can be frustrating. But
Mhm.
that shouldn't prevent us from trying to set boundaries and say something's not okay, and being transparent on why we're doing something because of how the relationship's affecting us.
Mhm.
So if a parent downgrades us or saying, it turned out just fine, so I can keep telling you this. Well, actually, no, you can't keep telling me this. I'm not comfortable with it. I don't want to keep hearing it. So we're saying
Mhm.
those I statements. And
Yeah.
if you keep telling me this, and I'm just going to be calling just to check in on you, just to
Mhm.
be sure that you're okay. But I will not have a transparent or vulnerable conversation with you because I don't feel comfortable to anymore.
Mhm. Well said. So what I'm also hearing is it's possible to be triangled, right?
Yes.
Wow. And how do you recognize that triangle? It's
Yeah.
interconnected, of course, but how do you recognize and get, become more differentiated then, so to speak?
Right. So that takes a lot of like mindfulness and self reflection of what's really happening. So feeling like, okay, our parent maybe is trying to pull you in um, to a situation. Maybe your father and mom want you to be in a situation to be in the middle of their argument.
Hmm.
Easily saying, that's not my place to be. You both can figure it out on your own. And that's it. You can still continue a relationship with your dad. You can still continue with a relationship with your mom. But when it comes to both of them arguing, that's not a place that you need to be in.
Hmm. Yeah. So you could still be that differentiated person, you know,
Yeah.
having your own opinion when it comes to
Right.
that. Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
even if we're not there, it's kind of hard not to be triangulated too.
Yeah,
Because your parents going to be like, well, she said this. No, well, she told me this, and you're not even there.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I thought about this idea of sometimes people will say, well, that's why I moved away. But can you share about, the fact that moving away sometimes probably won't, resolve the issues?
Yes, yes. So there are definitely many reasons why you turn 18 and you move away. It could be
Mhm.
college, like maybe you just got into university and that's the only university you got to, that's a little different. But if you're noticing that you're moving away, to create physical distance and hopefully that will create emotional distance, it
Mhm.
doesn't.
Yeah.
Because that parent's going to be calling you, that parent's going to be still telling you the same things that they told you when you lived in the house. It doesn't go away.
Mhm.
Um, you can be entirely emotionally disconnected and not have any contact with this parent, and
Mhm.
it still creates a pattern within your own family system without even knowing it.
Wow.
And the only way to break any generational problem, it's kind of like going straight into it,
Mm.
not stepping away from it, literally facing it face to
Mhm.
face. And this is entirely different from like narcissistic or
Yeah, the
that's
tendencies.
that's
Yeah.
a little bit different on how to set boundaries.
That's another episode.
Let's not touch that one.
Okay. Oh my goodness. Wow. So as you stated, you pinpointed that this can also, creep into your nuclear family.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
That's interesting. That's interesting. So this breaking away idea, as Christian pointed out, breaking the cycle, these generational trauma. What if that person then? How do you get to not get to have someone see that this is an issue clearly?
Yeah. Because it can be hard if you're saying this is an issue and they're like, no, it's not. And they're like closing their eyes. It's not an issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the one thing about boundaries is
Mhm.
when we've accepted it the first time, it just takes one time to accept it. And this is even for
Mm.
parents, new
Yeah.
parents. We accept it once. Now we know we can keep doing it and we'll be forgiven. We can keep doing it and that boundary will be dismissed because they'll say, okay, just this once.
Mhm.
So it just takes once to say that boundary. You really don't have the strength to hold that boundary.
Yeah. Yeah. And that boundary could be porous, whereas anything goes,
Right.
Wow, that's
Right.
interesting. Well, thanks for responding to that question. That was a great question. Um, so, as we wrap up, are there any takeaways from our conversation today?
Yes, I think the main takeaway is that just because something happened and you're trying to create deep connections with people in your life, you can still create that identity. You can still bypass that trauma with certain tools and support system that you need. You can
Mhm.
create that resilience, but it's going to take effort. It's not just allowing life to hit you every
Mhm.
single day. It's kind of grabbing life by the horns and saying, "No, this is what I want my life to look like and this is how much energy I'm going to put into it."
Yeah. So I love the idea that you mentioned resilience. What is that?
Resilience is a way to kind of stand up for yourself, um, kind of seeing, what life brings you. And is it something that you want to focus on, or do you want to just let it go? Because it's not something that's benefiting you anymore. It's not, it's actually causing more harm.
Yeah.
So it's being able to let things roll off your shoulders if you need to and not absorb it. Or it's being able to say, you know what, I'm going to focus on this and I'm going to see, what I can do with this information or what I can do with what happened.
Yeah. Wow. Beautiful. So, again, how can listeners connect with you on your social handles?
So they can connect with me on Instagram. It's Luminescent Mind. On Instagram, again, it's Dr. Katheryne Puentes. I do have a Facebook as well. It's Katheryne Puentes. They'll find it there. And my website has a whole bunch of resources on blogs, talks about trauma, identity, self-care, that they have free access to. And I do newsletters, once a month so that they can get free resources as well.
Mm-hmm. So you send out those newsletters just randomly, or do they have to sign up to your email?
Yeah. So I
Oh,
do have to sign up, which I have a link in the bio, and I have one of those little circle things in Instagram that they can click and just go straight to the link if they want to
yeah.
on my story. So they have that. And this is the spelling of the company name so that they have
Ah,
on there.
look at you. I'm so proud of you. Oh my gosh. I am so proud of you. And Tabitha said, I appreciate your time. I would like to see more interviews like this. I really connected with this content. Thank you, Tabitha. Ooh, you rock.
Thank you.
Okay. And great talk. Thanks. There's another comment. So, again, thank our listeners today, and for those who are watching from wherever you are. I know, others have commented that they also watch this globally as well as locally. And I do love that. And so, if you have not yet subscribed, please, please, please subscribe, share, subscribe, and watch this in its entirety, because it really helps me a lot when you do that. And from time to time, if there are any topics that you would like us to share in this space, and definitely I will have Dr. Katheryne come back again, because she is a wealth of information. And so I do appreciate that. And so, until the next podcast, thank you so much, guys. Continue to watch. And, this way you'll be the first, to be able to watch, because when the next episode comes around, you're already here in this space. There's nothing like community. And as Dr. Katheryne shared, we are all about, family, systems, because we're a systems thinker, not just the individual, but the whole person.
Yes. Yes, and thank you so much for having me on this podcast. I definitely look forward to the future and to have more of these conversations, because it would just benefit more education within our community to understand what's really going on with the self.
Yes, absolutely. You
Yeah.
will definitely be back again. Okay, no worries. So thanks again, guys. And until the next podcast, take care and be well.